Hey everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of Limited Principles, the new Magic the Gathering podcast that talks to you about first picks and how to build around them while in the heart of a format, and also talks about the staple cards of Limited when we're into late format or preview season. So let's dig right into it. Reminding you, if you're new to the podcast, what Limited Principles is about. These episodes, when we're in the midst of a format like currently Marvel Superheroes, we'll be talking about principal picks. Usually the cards you're picking, pack one, pick one. You finally get a sweet, mythic, rare, uncommon. Now what? How do you build around it? How are you prepared for seeing that card? Or in today's case, in what kind of shells can this card be good? We're already going to have a little bit of a deviation from pack one, pick one with our card today. It's not necessarily a card you would want to first pick, but it's a card you might look at and say, can this card be good? And we're going to investigate that today. And then later, when we get to late format and spoiler season, we'll look at some of the principal staple cards of Limited, things like divination effects or tormenting voice effects. What's a bear? What's a windrake? Things like that. History in the past formats, when it's been good, bad, or why. Principles of playing that card, what the veterans call it, the OG card name, and any version spoiled for an upcoming set, and early thoughts on how we think that card is going to play. And then lastly, it's about principles, spelled both ways, as you see on this slide, and a reminder that I am a teacher and a principal, and that's where I got the idea for the name of this podcast. And you can write this up to inexperience, but had a couple of comments on episode 1 saying, "Who are you? We don't even know who's giving this podcast." I probably will include some video later. I wanted this just to be an audio format initially, just kind of the ease of getting things up and running. But for now, my name's Mike Reiners. I'm known as Trescio in most Magic circles, like on Arena and on some guest appearances on some other podcasts. So nice to virtually meet you and to have you here. Thanks for watching and listening. So the first thing I wanted to go through today was proof of concept. Our episode 1 last week was about Super Adaptoid. If you haven't watched or listened to that episode, go back and grab it. But I had a draft this week where my pack one pick one was actually Mind Stone, the 2-mana mythic artifact that is a white mana rock initially, and then when you can harness it for 6 mana later on, and then it basically blinks one of your permanents every turn. And as a guest on Sirkovitz's Magic Numbers podcast, specifically the Archetype Skeletons, Draft Skeletons podcast that comes out previewing each season, when we did Marvel Superheroes, I started building these kind of limited principles shells. And one of my example cards for that was Mind Stone. I had built a white-black deck around Mind Stone. And so I drafted Mind Stone, pack one, pick one. And then I believe I took like Dark Deed, the 1 and a black, -4/-4 instant speed removal spell. Second pick, and then third pick I got Super Adaptoid. And what happened to me is what I'm hoping will happen for you as a result of watching or listening to these episodes, which is that I didn't have to think about how I ideally wanted to build around those 2 cards. As a matter of fact, I found myself going through the draft, merging some of the ideas that I'd already researched for the Mind Stone, which was that the best ETB blink targets in this format are white and black. And then going back to last week's research for Super Adaptoid, realizing that, well, you very much want to be white for Super Adaptoid because of keywords and protection and all those kinds of things. But that also, what are the cards in black that play well with Super Adaptoid? And so, like you see many times in this format, it ended up with pockets of synergy. And if you're watching the video version of this episode, I've got a picture of the deck in front of you. Deck ended up going 3-3, which I think was somewhat of an unlucky result for this deck. The first loss was a mulligan that ended up playing into an opponent who played back-to-back Atlantis attacks at a key moment of the game. So that was a somewhat unfortunate loss. And then one of the other losses in the format was questionable, maybe a little bit of a questionable keep, except I had drawn an initial hand that had both Mind Stone and Avengers Assemble, which was another mythic rare that I got later on in this draft. And both colors of mana and a couple removal spells, and I just never drew a creature. So questionable keep, because you usually don't want to keep, you know, a handful of spells as opposed to a handful of creatures. But because I had so much power in my hand, I decided to chance it. And anyway, the deck played fine. Was a little disappointed in the final result of 3-3, but the point was more the draft experience and the idea that I was almost able to go on autopilot during the draft because I knew exactly what I was looking for. I knew exactly the pieces that I preferred, and it allowed me to have a relatively stress-free draft experience and end up with a deck that I was very, very happy with. So let's go right into today's Pack 1 Pick 1, which is not really a Pack 1 Pick 1. I'm changing that to Pack 1 Pick 8 today, which is where I picked it. But we're going to talk about the card Baron Helmut Zemo, the black legendary creature, human noble villain, 3/3. So 3 black pips, very demanding casting cost. Whenever you cast a black spell from your hand, Baron Helmut Zemo, it is so hard for me not to say Baron Helmut Zero. But this card is not a 0. We're going to talk about that today. It has a 50.9%, basically a D- win rate right now, and I'm not surprised about that. But let me finish reading the card. When you cast a black spell from your hand, Baron Helmut Zemo connives, and then it has the boast ability, which is very demanding. Exile any number of black cards from your graveyard with 15 or more black mana symbols among their mana costs. Copy those exiled cards, and you may cast up to 3 of them without paying their mana costs. And the boast ability is you have to have attacked with Baron Helmut Zemo. So pretty obviously, I mean, if you just think about, I have 15 black cards in my deck. Well, if they each have 1 pip, then that's 15 of your 23 cards in your standard 40 card deck. And those are all black. So that's already giving you some clues about how this would have to happen. Oh, is one of those cards Baron Helmut Zemo? Well, then you want to have that on the board, which means it's not in your graveyard. Do you want any other cards on your board, or do you just want the Baron to like hold forth by himself? And then how late in the game are you? And you are definitely only using this boast ability 1 time because your graveyard's gone. So you can see terribly, terribly demanding. But one of the things I want to point out about this card has a 50.9%, again, D- win rate. It has a 55.5% win rate in mono black decks. And that's a large enough sample size now that we actually have statistics for it on 17 lands. So that's one of the things that interested me about this card. And in particular, where I came up with the idea for this episode was that I have only had this card in 1 deck, and that deck trophied at 7-2. And so the card can't be so bad that it's completely tanking the deck. And I wanted to look at why was that deck successful and what are you looking for. And in particular, this is probably more an episode about what a mono black or nearly mono black deck would look like in this format and how can it win. So important things to remember about the Baron. First of all, it's a 3 mana 3/3. If you can get past the casting cost, like if you can actually cast this on turn 3, it's an on-rate body. Now you say, well, it doesn't have an ability. Well, when you cast a black spell from your hand, it connives. And if you want to cast this card, you're already going to be largely black, which means you're going to have a lot of black spells to cast from your hand. So you can imagine this conniving for a good chunk of the rest of the game when you play it. And then it's a threat that grows as the game goes on, or at least has the potential to grow as you need it to. The boast ability we've already talked about. So what do we care about with this card if we actually want to play this card in our deck? Again, don't pick this card first pick. You're going to see an example of the draft of how I ended up with this card. I ended up with it at pick 8, and I did not have to sacrifice picks to take it. So what do we care about? Like, do we even care? This card is bad, right? Well, I have a counterexample to that in the deck that I just played, and I want to talk to you about how you can make this card more than serviceable, actually. You obviously want the deck to be as heavily black as possible. You want connive and second card synergies, since the Baron already is conniving on kind of a repeatable basis. So you want to be able to take advantage of that. In other words, you want synergy that will make the Baron better than just the text on his own card. And then you want spells you would actually care about recasting, because if you ever get to, maybe once in all of the draft games of a deck, if you get to use the boast ability, then that's only useful if there's powerful spells that you care about getting back in the very, 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 very late game. So how do you end up with this card? I want to look at the draft that I went through so you can get some idea of when I took the card and how I think it's probably a good idea for you to actually consider it. So I had started this draft by taking Cloak and Dagger, powerful white-black rare, 1 white-black, Death Touch, lifelink, 2/2. When it enters, you choose an opponent and one of their creatures, they reveal their hand, and you can either exile the card, a non-land card from their hand, or the chosen creature until Cloak and Dagger leave, which means you can exile a token and just kill it. You get to see their hand, which is important information, especially if it's early on turn 3. And then you can decide, I don't want you to have this card for a while, especially if it's like the removal spell that could kill Cloak and Dagger. You can just take that out of their hand for a while. So, powerful first pick, very reasonable rare. And then I took Dark Deed as my second pick. 1 and a black, -4/-4 instant. And then I took Take Up the Shield, the 1 and a white instant, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature and give it lifelink and indestructible till end of turn. So a decent white-black start. Fourth pick, there weren't very good white and black cards, and there wasn't like a super powerful card in another color. So I just took Subterranean Cavern. That's the green-black tap land, gain a life when it enters. A lot of times if you're playing black, you like the ability to touch green because you can, for example, play the gold card Killmonger, sacrifice a creature in order to destroy something of your opponent's. That's a very powerful uncommon. In fact, if I remember correctly, it's currently the top performing gold uncommon. So I was, speculating on green a little bit. And then I took Yellow Jacket, Heartless Marauder, 1 and a black, legendary creature, human rogue villain, 1/2 flyer. When another villain you control enters, Yellow Jacket gets +1 to power and gains lifelink until end of turn. This is like an average-ish black card, but again, it was a pretty weak pack. And so I just took a 2-drop that I had a decent chance of playing. And then I took Baron Strucker, Hydra Overlord, 2 and a black, 2/2, human villain. Villain spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, so was already some synergy with cards that I had and the way the deck was starting to come together. And whenever another villain you control enters, you may have it connive. Do this once a turn. And so again, that a repeatable connive with villains, and villains are cheaper. You can really start to power stuff out with Baron Strucker on board on 3. Then pick 7, I took Visions of Villainy. That's the 2 and a black instant. Costs 1 less if you control a villain. Draw 2 cards and lose 2 life. This has not been a very good draw spell in this format, but again, it performs much higher in decks that are closer to mono black. Because the closer you're to mono black, the less access to card draw and card advantage in other colors you have. And so those were the 7 cards of my deck. A little heavier black than anything else. My only touching of white was Cloak and Dagger, the 1 white-black creature, and Take Up the Shield, the white instant protection spell. And then pick 8. I was presented with these 3 cards. I was presented with Baron Helmut Zemo, and I would like to point out that there was a second Baron Helmut Zemo on pick 2 when I took the Dark Deed. And I noted that. And so this is the second one I'm seeing. And one of the things I want to point out to you is one of the best cards to pair with Baron Helmut Zemo is a second Baron Helmut Zemo, because it's black, black, black. And that's 3 of the 15 black pips that you will need. It's 20% of what you would need in your graveyard. And if you have a bunch of Connive, you can play the first Baron, and if your opponent is like, I don't want that thing to grow anymore, and they kill it, and it goes in your graveyard, and then you surprise them with a second one, that's pretty good. And the other 2 cards were Crossbones Malicious Mercenary, 3 and a black, 3/3, Death Touch. When another villain you control enters, put a +1/+1 counter on Crossbones. He deals 2 damage to each opponent. This ability triggers once per turn. That card has really been underperforming. It looks pretty good on the surface, looks like it's doing a lot, but that has not been performing very well. And then Unliving Legionnaire, 3 and a black, 3/2 flyer with the power up, 5 black, black, return up to 1 target creature card from your graveyard to your hand and put 2 +1/+1 counters on Unliving Legionnaire. It's been a very clunky card, very clunky kind of recursion card. And so the 2 other black cards were not exciting on pick 8. And nothing else on pick 8 from any of the other colors was anywhere decent. So I took the Baron. And I said, well, let's see how black I end up in this draft. And my next picks, pick 9 was Widow's Bite, the 1 and a black instant. Teamwork 3, that's the choose 1, and if you use Teamwork, you can choose both. Target creature gains Death Touch until end of turn. Target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn. This has been one of the weaker black removal spells, but it's like C minus range. Like, it's a playable card. And I'm going to talk to you about how this deck played out and how in this kind of deck, Widow's Bite played a very, very important role. And then the other Baron wheeled on pick 10. And so I took it and said, all right, let's try to do the double Baron thing with, the triple black pips. And then nothing else of really any note in pack 1. Several cards that were not playables. And then pack 2, pick 1, I got Leader Super Genius, the 2 blue 1/3 legendary Gamma Scientist villain. If a creature you control would connive, instead you draw a card and then that creature connives. And at the beginning of combat on your turn, target creature you control connives, which means you draw a card and then that creature connives. I mean, absolute bomb just by itself. It's a total card draw machine. But it plays nicely with all of the other conniving. All of a sudden, now Baron says when you cast a black spell from your hand, draw a card, and then Baron connives. So now you have Baron is a repeatable way of drawing cards off of Leader Super Genius. So again, if you're watching, here's the deck, and I'll post the link to the deck into the show notes. But it was heavy black. There were a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 blue cards. And those were Kid Loki, Falcon's Wing Harness, Futurist Forge, Justice Vance Astrovic, Leader Super Genius, and Wiccan Rising Magician. A number of very powerful blue cards, filling very specific roles. All the other cards in the deck were black. That means I was playing 18 of 23 cards as black cards. 2 copies of Baron, I already mentioned, with the 3 black pips. And a number of the other cards in the deck we're going to get to upcoming in the episode here. I was playing 9 swamps, 7 islands, and a hidden lair. That's the rare blue-black land. So that's coming in untapped. So I had 10 black sources and 8 blue sources. I would normally have been much heavier black in this deck, but I had blue cards at every slot in my curve, including a blue 1-drop. So I want to be able to play that Kid Loki on 1 if I draw it in my opening hand. And also, I really, really want to play Leader Super Genius on curve on 4 if I have it in hand to be able to do that, and that's double blue. So that was a reason why I shaded a little more heavily blue than I might normally, I might normally have played like 11 or 12 black sources in this deck and cut down on the blue. So I was heavy black, 7 removal spells. 2 copies of Dark Deed, the -4/-4. 2 copies of Widow's Bite, the Teamwork, Death Touch, -2/-2 spell. 2 copies of Cruel Alliance. That's the Teamwork Exile spell. Exiles mana value 3 or less creature, or any creature if you Teamwork it with Teamwork 3, and then gain. That also causes you to gain 3 life. And then I also later in the draft got Electra, the 2 black creature that destroys target creature an opponent controls with power 3 or less. So counting that as another removal spell. So I had 7 removal spells, and among all my black cards, there were 19 black pips, which means that Baron Helmut Zemo's kind of ultimate boast ability was within range for a game that would go to the very late game, or simply a game where I'm powering through my deck with like Leader and a bunch of Connive. And so basically, activating Baron was a real threat to my opponents in several games. Spoiler, I did not ever activate Baron, but several times my opponents took extreme efforts to remove Baron because I was 1 or 2 black pips away from activating the boast ability. And the threat of Baron, along with Baron being a meaningful threat that grew, was enough to give it a good role in the deck. So let's talk about, if you have a deck like this, like what kinds of cards do you want in it? Well, here are Gladys, Villain, and the Pips. Like, take them if you got them. Here are all of the other cards in the format, besides Baron Helmut Zemo, that have more than 1 black pip. And the first one is Dr. Doom. I mean, snap pick, like maybe even if you're in totally different colors and really consider your direction in life. Dr. Doom has a 66.6% win rate. It's an absolute bomb. 4 black, 3/3. That comes with 2 other 3/3s, and it's got indestructible and has beginning of your end step, draw a card and lose 1 life, and which we call a Phyrexian altar effect. Anyway, yeah, obviously you're taking Dr. Doom if it's presented to you. That's got 2 black pips. The next highest win rate card is Modok, 3 black, 2/2, legendary artifact creature villain with flying and lifelink. Pay 3 life and it connives. Activate only during your turn, which means you can grow it, and then it can be a bigger lifelink creature that can replace the life you're using by conniving. And then the static ability, creatures your opponents control get -1/-1. This is winning at 64%. Great card, bomb. Coming of Galactus is kind of the sneaky multiple black pip card because it's a gold card, 2 black, green. Notice that that's a card, another card that you would be happy to pick up if you got a green-black land from earlier. That's the saga with the chapters destroy up to 1 target non-land permanent, 2 chapters of each opponent loses 2 life, and then last chapter of create Galactus and win the game if they don't have a removal spell. 16/16, creature token with flying trample, and when it attacks, destroy target land. Winning at 63.5% currently. Then Electra, that was a card I did pick up later. One of the nice things about playing a very heavily black deck is you're kind of dominating it at the table probably. With black not being one of the strongest colors on its own in the format. And so you get cards with double black pips, they're very often going to be available to you. Who else is going to take them? And Electra is the 3/3 we talked about before that when it comes in, destroys target creature an opponent controls with power 3 or less, and can be snuck in for 1 less mana. And then Super Skrull is another triple black pip card. 1 black, 4/5. Legendary Skrull Shapeshifter villain. Flyer. 2 and a white, create a 0/4 colorless wall creature token with Defender. 3 and a green. Super Skrull gets +4/+4 until end of turn. 4 and a red, it deals 4 damage to target creature, and 5 and a blue, target player draws 4 cards. That's winning at 59%. So a tick down from those other bomby rares here. But here's the key point. There are no other non-bonus sheet black cards with 2+ pips. So you're not going to go and collect pips any other way, and you're not going to collect them from any common or uncommon cards. And as a reminder, bonus sheet cards occur once in every 24 packs. So that means at your draft table, at a standard pod draft table with 8 people and 3 packs, you're on average going to see 1 bonus sheet card of any color in the entire draft. Now, what are the chances that it's black? So don't count on it, folks. There are some, double pip black cards on that bonus sheet. Actually, several of them. But your odds are just don't even, it's not a consideration. So the point is, your extra pips are going to come in these black rares and mythics if you're going to get them. But the good thing is, you want all these cards. They're all amazing. You would love to have them. Like, they're way better than the Baron is. But they play nicely together because they're black cards that you want to play. And several of them connive and or are removal and do similar things, and are the bombs you would like to maybe recur if you get them back with the Baron. You'd love to replay these things. So anyway, just know that plan on all of the rest of your cards as you're going heavy black being only single pip. And let's look at some of those. What are the premium commons and uncommons you're looking for? There are 3 that rise above the rest. Dark Deed, 1 in a black instant, -4/-4. Cheap instant speed removal, winning at 60%. Just to go back for a second, I want you to notice that is winning at the same rate and slightly above Super Scroll. So Super Scroll's hard to cast. Again, Super Scroll's numbers get even better. They get into the 60% when you're looking at mono black decks. Part of what you're dealing with there is the casting cost. But this is just to emphasize how great of an uncommon removal spell Dark Deed is. It's really good. It also, by the way, gets around a ton of indestructibility in this set with the -4/-4 effect. Cruel Alliance, unconditional removal plus life gain. Another removal spell, 2 in a black sorcery, teamwork 2. Oh, sorry, I said teamwork 3 earlier. That was my mistake. Lots of 3s on this card. Teamwork is not one of them. Exile target creature with mana value 3 or less. It was cast using teamwork 2. Instead, you exile target creature, any creature, and you gain 3 life. Does 2 things for you. Unconditional removal potentially, but certainly a removal spell, and the potential for life gain helps keep you alive. Very good in playing an attrition-y longer game. And then the third is a creature, Madame Mask, 4 in a black, 3/2 legendary human villain. When Madame Mask enters, she connives, so there's some of your connive synergy. And more importantly, whenever you draw your second card each turn, read, please, whenever you connive, create a 2/1 black villain creature token with menace. So now you start to have a late game engine. Now all of a sudden, I want you to imagine, for example, that you have Baron on board, and you play Madame Mask, and you are now conniving twice, because you're conniving when you cast the black spell from your hand. That cast triggers Baron's conniving, and then when Madame Mask enters, she connives, and then she sees the connive that she has. So the unfortunate thing is, the turn you play Madame Mask with Baron on board, she doesn't see the second card drawn because you've already drawn that card with Baron, but she does see every subsequent one. And the fact is, you just get 2 connives. So if you have any other connive synergy going on, you've triggered it twice. For example, Leader Super Genius, you're drawing 4 cards and discarding 2, which is absurd. So connive and repeatable payoff, winning at 59%, a very, very, very good 5-drop. And so these are the cards that you would really like in your deck. You're very happy with multiples, even multiples of Madame Mask, so that if they kill it, you can just play another. So for other black cards, we need to consider what kind of game you're playing. You're a small, longer game in a big, shorter games world. There's lots of big games in this format, lots of big boards. sometimes board stally situations. But most of the decks in this format, especially given that the uh, best performing color pair is white-blue, the the most of the decks in this format are trying to snowball you. They're trying to create these big boards and then snowball you and run you over, um, or have a big board and then I've got the one or two biggest threats. You can't deal with them, and I win the game. Um, so what you're trying to do is disrupt that, which means these four cards are really good includes for you. Um, all of these cards are like B minus E, C plus E kinds of cards, which means they're cards you want in your deck. And again, so many of these cards uh, have higher win rates the more black the deck is. Keep remembering that. So the first one, Claw Sonic Subjugator, 2 and a black, 2/2. Legendary human rogue villain. When Claw enters, target player reveals a number of cards from their hand equal to 1 plus the number of creature cards in your graveyard. You choose one of them, that player discards that card. It's hand disruption. Um, and the thing I want you to remember is you have tons of connive. You're going to be chucking stuff in your graveyard. You're playing a small, longer game, which means you don't mind trading stuff off, which means your graveyard is going to fill for a couple of different ways. And so when you play Claw, later in the game, it's another way for you to see your opponent's hand, first of all, and then you're often going to have selection of their entire hand for what to chuck away. It just removes resources, and then your opponent has a tougher time building that big board and shortening the game. Second, we have Hydra Infiltration, the 3 and a black enchantment. When it enters, target opponent discards 2 cards. Hand destruction, removing resources, making it a smaller game. Whenever a creature you control attacks alone, target opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. And a lot of times you're going to have like one viable attacker, and maybe it's just something simple like a 2/1 menace villain token that you sometimes might even attack just for, sacrificially, just to drain a life. You have those options, and the draining of a life extends the game, for you anyway. Then you have Hour of Defeat, the 3 and a black instant, destroy target creature, surveil 1. Allows you to put a black pipped card that you don't care about or is not effective in that game state into the graveyard. Allows you to pitch lands and get through your deck faster. It's kind of a lesser cruel alliance, right? It's instant speed, which is nice. 4 mana, destroy target creature. It's been a perfectly fine, kind of average-ish card. It's the murder of the format, kind of. And then Widow's Bite, we already talked about. That's the 2 mana teamwork, Death Touch, -2/-2. You can think of that as a lesser Dark Deed. And this is a good time for me to talk about how Widow's Bite was effective in this deck, which is that I was very happy to have one in my opening hand. Yes, you can sometimes face decks that have where your opponent is playing a 1/3, and then Widow's Bite doesn't just kill it. But there were tons of times where my opponent was like, I'm going to play the 2/1 white lifelinker, and then you Widow's Bite it and kill it. There were times where my opponent would play a Justice on turn 3 and make me pick up one of my things, which that's fine. If we keep trading blows, that also extends the game. They would play Justice. Widow's Bite is an instant. I would then kill Justice and be mana up on that trade, and kill that -2/-2, and then they've lost their flyer. There were very few times where Widow's Bite was dead in my hand. Having 2 of them in the deck, even if I drew the second one later when it was less effective, I could always connive it away. Connive, in combination with this, the more connive you have, the more useful Widow's Bite is, because it's useful in the cases where you need it. It kills the 2/2 or the 3/2 or the whatever, or finishes something off, or gives surprise Death Touch. It does what it's supposed to do, and in the times where it's not effective for your board state, it's totally fine. You just connive it away, 1 more black pip in the graveyard for Baron. Then some other non-embarrassing connive tools. These are C-level cards that are on plan. Like they they're totally fine cards to have in your deck. Baron Strucker we talked about. That's the 3-mana 2/2. Villain spells cost 1 less, and when another villain enters, you may have it connive. Oh, this is a mistake on my slide. It is not a 2-drop. I looked at 2/2. It's a 3-drop, not a 2-drop. But it's still a cheap card. It's a cost reducer. So even though you're paying an extra mana for that 2/2, you know, it's awfully powerful if you play Baron on 3, and then on turn 4 you can play like 2 3-mana black villains, or a 4-mana and a 2-mana black villain, or you can play Madam Mask, the 5-mana card, on 4. I did that in several games, and it's an easy connive trigger. The idea is to have enough of a density of these connive triggers and payoffs that your opponent can't remove all of them. Red Room Recruit, 2-drop, 1/2, 1 and a black. When it enters, it connives. It's a villain. 2-drop common that can filter you early and late. Often smooths out your draws, lets you get to a 3rd land if you haven't seen it early, and then later on it's just another connive trigger, and you know, it's giving you a draw and discard. Nice. And then lastly, Yellow Jacket. That's the 1/2 flyer that +1 and gains lifelink when another villain enters. We saw it earlier. Often in a game with a bunch of black cards where there's villains everywhere, it's often attacking for 2 or 3 and keeping you alive. Sometimes it even is a surprising 2/2 on defense in certain situations, when you manage to connive on your opponent's turn. So it's a perfectly serviceable card. I like having one in my 2 slot. None of these are amazing cards, but they're on plan. Then let's talk about the non-black cards with connive, because if you're going to play another color, I showed you earlier that my deck touched blue. If you're going to play another color, what should it be? Well, we talked already about Leader's Super Genius. That's the 2 blue, 1/3 that lets you draw before you connive, and that's a bomb in every definition of a bomb. It's fantastic. I'm listing you all the non-black cards with connive, and the fact that I can fit them on on one slide should tell you something. Trickster's Stratagem, that's the 3 and a blue sorcery, the very well performing blue removal spell. Owner of target creature an opponent controls puts it in their library second from the top or the bottom, and then up to 1 target creature you control connives. So that's super on plan for the deck we're building here. It's removal plus connive. Aim Scientist is the 3 and a blue 3/3 human scientist villain. When it enters, it connives. It's a villain. It connives. Great. And it's also a land cycler for 2. Potentially helps you smooth things out, although you're usually going to be looking for blue, not for black in your deck. But again, if you need to cycle it early because you're stuck on lands, it's another little minor tool, and it's a totally fine creature on 4. Comes in, connives, maybe triggers a villain synergy. And then lastly is Kang, Temporal Tyrant. That's the gold card, 2 blue black for a 3/4 legendary human villain. Whenever Kang attacks, he connives. That is obviously worse than entering and conniving. And whenever you draw your second card each turn, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. It's kind of a clunky card. I like it less than all 3 of the other cards that were named before it. Mainly because Aim Scientist has an ETB. I mean, if Kang sticks and can stick around for a while and do some draining, it's fine, but I could totally see drafting a Kang and cutting it from a deck like this. And then, what do we want to recast? Like, what would you ideally... Let's say you manage to pull off Baron Helmut Zemo's boast ability at the end, and you've got 15 pips in your graveyard, and it's super late in the game. You know, both you and your opponent have single-digit cards left in your deck. What do you want to get back? Well, you want to get back your strongest creature, which is hopefully one of those like 5 black multi-pip bombs that we looked at earlier. And I pictured Electra here because that was the bomb rare that I had in black. Would have been totally happy to get her back. You get back a 3/3 and maybe kill one of their smaller creatures. You want a finisher, and here I put up Grim Reaper, the 3 and a black 3/4 human villain that when it attacks you may pay 3 and a black to return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped and attacking with a finality counter on it. Now, this is not really a card that you want to play, and I'm picturing this to talk about it for a couple reasons. You don't want to play the recursion cards in this deck because your method of recurring stuff is going to be Baron. If you get that far, you're not planning on winning the game that way. You're planning on winning the game by attrition and a lot of removal. And uh, and if you're retrieving things from your graveyard, you're slowing down the plan with Baron, right? So you really only want retrieval if you have a ton of good stuff to get back, um, and lots and lots of targets for it. And even with Grim Reaper, uh, one of your problems is going to be, what are you going to return because you just exiled 15 pips from your graveyard? You got to be really careful what you exile. I mean, you can obviously exile Grim Reaper itself, but then you better leave a creature in there that you would also like to get back tapped and attacking. The one nice thing is Grim Reaper lets you replay like the bomb you get back. Like, okay, you get back Electra and then they kill it, and then Grim Reaper attacks and you get Electra back again. You can basically play those best cards that you got back over and over again potentially. Another example would be like the the 4 and a black black creature that's like the 4/4 with Menace. That's not a great card. But if these are like the 22nd, 23rd card in your deck, you want something that can do damage and attack well and finish. Remember, of course, that you're only going to be getting back black cards, so it's not like you could get back like Leader, the blue bomb. You wouldn't want it back anyway because you're going to be drawing. You're going to potentially deck yourself at the end of the game. But you know, your strongest creature might be the finisher. Like if you're getting back Doctor Doom, that's a finisher. If you're getting back MODOK, that's a finisher. Um, you know, if you're getting back like the Galactus, um, the Coming of Galactus, that Saga, that's a finisher, right? Um, you're finishing your strongest creature, your strongest card might be the same thing. And then you've got a ton of removal spells to get back. So it's going to be some combination of like strong creatures, finishers, removal spells is what you should plan on getting back at the end of the game. If you actually manage to fire off Baron's boast ability. But remember, that's the least of your concerns actually. It's there, it's a threat. Your deck will have the pips to pull it off, but your opponent's probably going to care more about it than you do. And so it's more the threat of that happening than anything else, and you're playing enough of a combination of good cards that that you don't need that to be your win condition. And so here's the Baron Helmut Zemo and friends, all of the cards that we've talked about today. Sealeddeck.tech link is there, and I'll also link that in the comments for this show. This is a little bit of a shorter episode because there were less cards and less colors to consider, but I hope that it was still useful to you to talk through some of these things. And again, I used Baron Helmut Zemo to talk about as kind of the focal card and the build around in this episode, but I want you to think about this episode more of what does a close to mono black deck look like in this format, and how can it win? What are the cards that we want? What cards play together? And again, I have some evidence that it's viable. This deck, the deck that you saw earlier and we talked about earlier in the episode, again, also linked in the comments and show notes. That deck went 7-2 and did very nicely, and I was very happy with it. So what are the takeaways here? You get a card like this, you want to be heavy black for several reasons, and Boast is the least of them. That's the least of your concerns. A variety of cheap removal is critical. Remember that we had 2 copies of 3 different removal spells plus Electra. You don't mind keeping the game small. That's very important to remember. One of the things I always have to remind myself in Magic in general, but for sure in limited Magic where your deck is changing all the time, is how does my deck win? Connive plays a major role here, filtering out what you don't need, and also triggering a bunch of the Connive and second card related synergies. But the filtering out what you don't need and putting the tools in your hand that are applicable to the particular game state you're playing in, and filtering out the ones that don't matter is very, very important, especially in a format that is super dependent so far as it appears super dependent on card draw and card advantage. And your secondary colors should be blue. You're not finding connive anywhere else. Yeah, you can find a little card draw in some other places, but this is uh, blue's the way to go. But you can be very selective about what cards you put in. I mean, you want them to be very powerful, impactful cards in that other color, because you want the powerful black cards to be plentiful and the main aspect of your deck. Thank you very much for watching and listening. We're going to be on our normal Friday release schedule now, new episodes every Friday. I've got socials up there, YouTube and X and Blue Sky. If you have comments, I'd love for you to put them on YouTube for now. You can, hit up the Limited Principles account on the other socials there if you like. Happy to interact with people there. But if you have comments specifically about the episode, I'd love for you to put them on YouTube for now. That it increases the reach of the YouTube video and also allows me to look at them in one concentrated place. And if you want to see more of these videos, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. This podcast is now up also on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts, and the RSS feed is through, I think, all of the major podcast providers. So you should be able to find it just about anywhere. If there's somewhere that you are not seeing it, where you would like to see it, drop me a line. I am Trescio. Trescio19 is my handle on Discord. If you want to locate me there, that's a good place to send me a private message. And there's a QR code here if you like what you see and would like to support the podcast, and you can buy me a coffee, offer a tip of whatever tiny size that you like. So thanks very much, and we'll see you next Friday for the next episode of Limited Principles.